Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the remainder of the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime and for the light novels Can't Fear Your Own World in the video to come. The end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc left us with a lot of questions, including leaving the fates of several fan-favourite characters up in the air completely. Despite the epilogue doing its absolute best to close the book on Bleach, showing us where much of the cast ended up in the decade following the war, there were some characters who disappeared entirely, and that includes the complete roster of the arc's villainous force, the Sternritter. And this always felt particularly egregious to me, because it seemed as though there was no effort made on Kubo's part to preserve any aspect of the wider Quincy race once the war was over, save for Uryu and Ryuken. In that sense, we simply found ourselves back at square one, as though the footprint of the Quincy people hadn't been enormously expanded over the course of the arc, almost as if the Vandenreich hadn't existed at all. It always seemed like the Sternritter had been completely obliterated, and the majority of the Quincies were, once again, dead. While that's a big shame narratively, it's also somewhat understandable from Kubo's point of view. The Sternritter were designed to be pretty reprehensible and unsympathetic across the board, hence the lack of backstories, and the idea of rehabilitating many of them into the world of Bleach as we know it, especially post-war, in a new age of peace, seems a little far-fetched. Though, to be honest, I could envision a future quite easily where the likes of Basby somehow lived to see another day, but it wasn't to be. What makes the Sternritter a special case when compared with the rest of these post-Thousand Year Blood War arc videos that we've looked at, however, is that unlike the characters we've talked about before, Aizen, Grimjo, Harabel and Neliel, Kisuke and Yoroichi, even Yhwach himself, the Sternritter is a huge group of very disparate characters with very differing fates, and so it was never going to be totally cut and dry regarding their current status. Hell, we looked at the Vizard in the aftermath of the Thousand Year Blood War arc as well pretty recently, and while they're a much smaller group, and crucially they're all still alive, even they find themselves spread out across the Bleach spectrum. There is one interesting angle to look at the possible survival of the Sternritter from, however, while many of them were genuine monsters, the likes of Kirige, Pepe, and yes, Giselle come to mind, it's totally possible that many of them weren't as well, and in many ways it's easy to see them all as victims of Yhwach himself, who, as I've noted before, feels like a cancer on the Quincy race, someone who, from one side of his mouth, calls them all his children, but from the other, is more than happy to brutally rob them of their lives and power at any moment, just to rejuvenate himself. In many ways, the Sternritter feel more like tools than actual people, like weapons than actual characters, and while sure you could argue that's one of the main issues with them narratively, it does also help to paint them in a sympathetic light, even if that's not necessarily what Kubo is going for. Basically what I'm getting at is it could be interesting to see any surviving Sternritter trying to live in a world where Yhwach no longer has any sway over them, any hold. Previously, they would have lived every day of their lives with the threat of having those existences taken from them, hanging over them at any moment. But now, in a sense, they're free. Anyway, regardless of all that, the future definitely looks bleak for the Sternritter at the end of the Thousand Year Blood War arc. And I guess you would expect that of the losing side, except it's not in Kubo's nature to completely decimate his villains. Many Arrancar lived on, with several surviving Espada taking up key roles within the lore and world of Bleach, and of course Execution is still around as well, with characters like Ginjo and Tsukishima even passing on to the Soul Society. Of course, the main problem is that it does usually take Kubo a bit of time to sow the seeds of the survival of his villains. For example, we didn't know concretely about the survival of any Espada, save for Grimjo, that he kind of just disappears in the Waco Mundo arc. And to be honest, his fate was pretty up in the air for some years, with no concrete confirmation either way. And then characters like Execution, some of them were revealed to have survived in the epilogue of the arc, while others like Ginjo and Tsukishima, their fates were presumed dead until the start of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, it does take Kubo a little while to reveal the fates of any surviving villains, and of course with this being the final arc of Bleach, there was no other place to do that than here in the epilogue, which we didn't get. So, what exactly did happen to the Sternritter in the wake of the Quincy Blood War? Who, if anyone, survived, and what role do they play in Can't Fear Your Own World? Before we take a look at that, first let's dive into how their story ends in the manga. So obviously, with the Sternritter being the major opposing force of the Thousand Year Blood War arc, they don't have one unified ending per se, kind of like the Espada. In fact, Sternritter are regularly killed off throughout the arc, as you'd expect. But looking at the Varvelt arc through to the end of Bleach, and again at least going off what the manga reveals, the Sternritter all meet a pretty grisly and definitive end. For the most part, anyway. After leading a rebellion against Yhwach, Bazby is cut down and killed by Hashwalth, or left to die anyway, while Lil Toto and Giselle attempt to fight the king himself, in maybe the most ridiculous plan of the entire manga. Unsurprisingly, they are overwhelmed with ease. Now, in the manga, we see Giselle lying face down in a pool of her own blood, while Lil Toto's insides appear to have been gouged out, and she too collapses after lamenting being unable to even lay a scratch on Yhwach. Now, of course, the anime has transformed this ending somewhat, where Candice and Meninus' fates were left completely ambiguous in the manga. Prior to the Owl's Valen, Lil Toto noted that they were both probably still alive, and then we never see them again. In the anime, it is clear that they were killed, and Giselle has added them to her zombie army. What this means for their future in Can't Fear Your Own World, well, we'll get to that later. The same goes for Bambietta, who also reappeared in a new sequence, albeit still as a zombified slave. In terms of the Sternritter as an enemy, Yhwach's Schutzstaffel all meet different fates by the end of the arc. Askin is defeated by the combined efforts of Kisuke and Grimjo and has his heart ripped out by the Espada, leading to a pretty conclusive death. Honestly, I was pulling for Askin to survive, no surprise there, but as soon as Kubo revealed the character's motivation, I knew he was pretty much doomed, since it made him into an unequivocal villain. Pernida Pankajaz, despite being the left arm of the Soul King, also has a fairly definitive death on screen too, with Mairi allowing it to be infected by Nemu's advanced cell regeneration gland, causing it to multiply and grow uncontrollably, leading to the deity's demise as it explodes violently, the remaining pieces of its flesh also regenerating and exploding until they too are no more. And interestingly, I actually think the anime, having rewatched it very recently, gives Pernida an even more conclusive death than in the manga, just blowing up the entirety of the hand and making it pretty obvious that there is no coming back. Even the fleshy bits that are sent flying don't seem to regenerate whatsoever. Leal Barrow has perhaps the least conclusive defeat of the Schutzstaffel, having his godly power split and dispersed by the Shinken Hakyoken, causing a massively weakened version of the character to fall to the Serete, now taking the form of an army of glowing birds. These birds wreak havoc on the remaining Shinigami until they are confronted by the resurrected Izuru Kira, who, presumably, goes on to defeat them all. And that brings us to the final two Sternritter, Gerard Valkyrie and Ugram Hashwalth, who are both defeated in the same chapter, chapter 680. Having defeated Ichigo, Yhwach unleashes another Ausvalen to steal the powers of Gerard and Hashwalth. For whatever reason, Gerard's entire body is stripped to the bone and he's killed instantly, his colossal skeleton crumbling before the Gotei 13's eyes. Hashwalth, however, retains his form, but has his vitality and strength robbed from him all the same. In his last moments, Hashwalth allows Uryu to use the antithesis one more time to swap their wounds, ensuring Uryu can face Yhwach at full health before succumbing and dying. And so yeah, once Yhwach is killed in chapter 684, it certainly looks as though every single Sternritter has been taken out here in the manga. Luckily though, that isn't the case, and Can't For Your Own World reveals an expanded role for those who manage to survive against all odds, so let's take a look. Whether it's a future they would want to have or not, and whether it's a future that will even come to pass in the anime, remains to be seen. So in terms of the timeline, the Sternritter returned to the story very shortly after Yhwach's defeat, as is revealed in a flashback during Can't For Your Own World's first volume. Lil Toto, who has really been the face of the Bambis since their introduction prior to the second invasion, wakes up after her failed rebellion and defeat at the hands of Yhwach himself, to find that she's been healed and her life saved by an unknown benefactor. Realising that both Giselle and Bambietta have also been rescued, Lil Toto discerns that they must be in one of their hideouts in the human world, sensing a number of other Quincy recovering in the same building. Which is an awesome idea, and one that I wish had been explored more. In fact, I wish the Vandenreich had been involved in the human world to really any capacity during the present-day storyline, but I understand it not being a priority location for the events taking place in the narrative. Anyway, Lil Toto discovers that they were rescued by none other than Hashwalth's mysterious aide, a female Quincy who appeared only in chapter 544 and then never again in the manga. Funnily enough, the exact same chapter the majority of the Bambis were also introduced in. She was always a peculiar character, and her eyes in particular are very strange, but ultimately this feels like pretty typical light novel fare of taking a completely innocuous, one-off background character and making them into a much bigger deal than they have any right to be. Speaking of which, the novel goes on to state that Hashwalth's aide apparently exceeded several of the Sternritter in pure archery skills and battle ability, but hadn't taken a shrift as she preferred to remain under Hashwalth's command. I've got to be honest, that doesn't feel like a decision she would be allowed to make for herself. If Yhwach really wanted her to have a shrift, I can't see any way of her avoiding that, and Hashwalth wasn't likely to defy the king in that way either. However, the aide informs Lil Toto that Hashwalth died after he had his powers taken, and that Yhwach was killed shortly afterwards by the combined efforts of Ichigo and Aizen, which shocks the Sternritter. Now, in the novel, Lil Toto takes this opportunity to ask about Candice and Meninas, which makes perfect sense per the manga. However, as I mentioned earlier, the anime shows that Giselle zombified the two of them, and brought them with her to Varvelt. In fact, the last time we saw the Bambis, the 5 of them were defeated by Yhwach himself and lay, possibly dead, at his feet in the throne room. It was the very last scene of Core 3. So if the light novel is going to remain canon in any way, and I'm not so sure personally, the aide will surely have to find Candice and Meninas at the same time as Lil Toto and the others, or else things are going to be changed dramatically. The reason I say that is because the aide mentions that they tried to get to Candice and Meninas as well, but they didn't make it in time, and instead they were captured by the Soul Society's 12th Division, along with another Sternritter, Nanana Najakoop, which is just brilliant. Seriously, of all the Sternritter to keep alive, I have no idea why the novel chooses Nanana. And maybe this is harsh of me, but he feels like a complete waste of a pick over someone like Basby, or hell, even my boy Askin, who the audience actually cares about. And of course, let's not forget that Candice and Meninas are both clearly dead and zombified, along with Bambietta in the anime. But that's not important right now. What's important is that Lil Toto then proceeds to ask the aide why she saved them, when she worked directly for Hashwalth, and they were presumably seen as traitors by the Vandenreich High Command at that point in the war. Surprisingly though, the aide reveals that it was Hashwalth's order, when Yhwach had his final sleep, and Hashwalth inherited the power of the Almighty for the last time. The Sternritter Grand Master ordered his aide to collect the wounded Quincy and heal them. This is perhaps the most fascinating section of the light novel in regards to the Vandenreich, in my opinion, as we get some much needed insight from a Sternritter. The aide informs Lil Toto that all of the Schutzstaffel were killed in battle, thereby giving us some closure on Lil, and Lil Toto muses that even Naklavar was taken out, which I quite like. Interestingly, as Lil Toto thinks on what happened, she seems pretty definite in her assessment that Gerard was the retainer for Rayo's heart, while Askin was seemingly only passing on conjecture. The aide reaffirms that Hashwalth gave her the order to save the others when he last had the power to see the future, and that he mentioned to her that the ability to see the future was unfair, implying he saw a future where the Vandenreich ultimately lose. He instructed the aide to keep the Quincies' futures connected, no matter what happens, which again I like, because at least someone is looking out for their race in a post-Yuharbak world, and not simply allowing it to practically die out once again. But now, this is very interesting. The scene this moment in the book appears to be referring to is from chapter 635, when Lil Toto and Giselle are defeated by Yuharbak. In the moments immediately following their defeat, Yuharbak goes back to sleep, and his power passes to Hashwalth. Hashwalth then ominously muses that the ability to see the future is a cruel power indeed. If you ask me, this seems to be the same moment that the aide is talking about, so perhaps we're meant to think that she is there with Hashwalth at this very time. However, what's truly interesting about this scene is where or where not it might slot into the anime. Even though we are way beyond this scene now in the anime in terms of chapter count, the truth is that Core 3 ended by going back to this moment, to the defeat of the Bambis at the hands of Yuharbak, which means we've technically yet to see the immediate aftermath of this scene in the anime, which is this Hashwalth moment. However, things have changed a lot in the anime, to the point where it almost feels like they're trying to scrub away the future for the Quincies as depicted in Can't Fear Your Own World. For starters, Hashwalth's aid was cut from the anime altogether. But secondly, Hashwalth is currently battling Uryu while using the Almighty. The implication in the anime is that Yuharbak defeated the Bambis while he was asleep, thus his power never had to transfer. So, seemingly, none of this is going to happen in the anime, which really makes me wonder, are they just killing off the Bambis outright in the anime version? At this point, the only way for them to survive, it would seem, is for Orihime to heal them when she arrives at the throne room. But that doesn't seem realistic to me at all. I mean, she'll be in the middle of fighting Yuharbak. Even Orihime, I wouldn't have thought, would have prioritised healing the Bambis over helping Ichigo in the midst of an actual fight. Then there's the fact that the throne room Yuharbak fights Lil Toto and Giselle in the manga is quite clearly not the main throne room. As we can see here, this is more like a personal chamber of Yuharbak where he goes to sleep in, as his chair is seen facing out a giant window over a balcony of sorts. Whereas in the anime, it is made pretty clear that Lil Toto and Giselle and the zombified Bambis assault Yuharbak in the main throne room, going through the same door that Ichigo and Orihime will later go through as well. Meaning, the bodies of the Bambis as they are currently lying in the anime will be caught up in the massive battle that's about to take place. Again, I don't see how anyone is going to be able to make off with them and heal them in those circumstances, but I could be wrong. I guess anything is possible. It's totally possible that Hashwalth's aid comes out of nowhere in Core 4 and sequesters away the Bambi's bodies and heals them in time for Can't Fear Your Own World, or some kind of adaptation of that story. But if you ask me, judging by what we've seen so far, judging by the way things have played out, it looks like the anime is not gonna give the Bambis the same ending they get in the light novel. Either way, Lil Toto notes that while she won't thank the aid, she will keep Giselle in check, and once the 3 Sternritter are healed, they leave the hidden base. The aide, meanwhile, secretly notes that Hashwalth had said one last thing to her, that he saw Uryu Ishida as his final test, perhaps given to him by Yuharbak, and that if he strayed from his path as a balancer, then perhaps he would have to relinquish his life and his powers. The aide wonders if Hashwalth saw an element of his future and knew what was coming, and wonders what Uryu might have said to him to make that a reality. Of course, we know that Uryu shook Hashwalth to his core with his words regarding friendship and the relationship he had with his friends, upending Hashwalth's entire belief system, or at least the belief system he had constructed for himself to try and keep his regrets at bay. Anyway, let's circle back to the present day as of Can't Fear Your Own World, 6 months after the end of the war. In a really awesome world-building development, it's revealed that there are surviving cells of Quincies still fighting the Arrancar in Waco Mundo, though they are being forced back continuously. Eventually, however, when Rudborn, along with Lowly and Menely, find one of the last surviving hunting army units, they are surprised to see Lil Toto, Giselle, and the zombified Bambietta arrive to reinforce the Quincies. Lil Toto and Giselle argue, with Lil Toto wondering about Bambietta's seemingly deteriorating condition, though Giselle assures her Bambietta will be fine with a bit of blood, and sends the zombie out to keep fighting their enemies on the desert sands. Interestingly, we discover here that Giselle can only zombify hollows temporarily, due to their toxic Raryoku. Later, we learn that the Quincy can no longer use Volstendish after being struck by the Owl's Valen, which we knew from the manga, though I've always kind of wondered about that, since Yuhabak carves a letter into their soul to awaken the power of their Shrift. I would have always thought that that was the power that he would then take back, but he actually takes back their Volstendish, which again does make sense, as we've seen that he's even able to remotely activate their Volstendish in both the anime and the manga. The anime also somewhat contradicts the light novel here again as well, as it's noted in the novel that Sclavarai allows Quincies to break down even hollow reishi and absorb it without harm, clearly in reference to Kirige using that power on Ion, and in my opinion was done as an attempt to explain how he could do it before the anime came around. However, the anime has gone out of its way to reveal that Kirige's monstrous appearance was a result of him being unable to fully break down Ion's reishi due to its inherent toxicity. It's revealed that Lil Toto and Giselle's ultimate plan is to break into the Soul Society's 12th Division in order to rescue the captured Candice and Meninas, though Giselle also wants to get revenge on Mayuri, which Lil Toto advises against. At one point they consider zombifying Ichigo himself, but decide that not only is he extraordinarily powerful, but he's also incredibly well protected. Meanwhile, the zombified Bambietta battles Rudborn and his Exequius, as Rudborn releases his Zanpakuto Arbol. Having improved the rate at which he can conjure soldiers, Rudborn is able to overwhelm even Bambietta's the Explode, and she becomes terrified at the prospect of facing undying soldiers once again. With Bambietta on the verge of some kind of nervous breakdown, Lil Toto steps in to rescue her, and devours a portion of Lowly's Resurrection Escolopendra. Here, Can't Fear Your Own World reveals that Lil Toto's the Glutton is considerably more powerful than the manga ever let on, as Lil Toto notes that she can assimilate the abilities of those she eats. Thanks to this, she unleashes newly poisonous arrows at the Hollows, but is stopped by the sudden arrival of the former Espada, Harabel, Neliel, and Grimjo. Harabel wonders what the Quincies are doing causing trouble, considering Yuhabak is dead, but their conversation is erupted by the appearance of Hikone. Much later, the 3 Sternritter are hiding out in the human world again. Giselle wonders why Lil Toto went out of her way to help the Arrancar fight Hikone briefly, to which Lil Toto explains that she realised Hikone was able to wield powers from every race, including Blue Vein. Regardless, she ponders if Hikone's appearance indicates some kind of internal conflict among the Shinigami, and that they might be able to use the chaos to rescue Candice and Meninas from the 12th Division. Come the second volume of Can't Fear Your Own World, our perspective switches to that of Candice Catnip, who is being held by Mayuri in the R&D department, trapped in a large glass tank while her body is slowly submerged in a strange yellow liquid, numerous chains binding her in place. Mayuri reveals they've done all manner of experiments on her, including dissection, though he's quick to note that he finished his research into Quincy's long ago, and this was really more about saving her life, after he found Candice half dead and about to be absorbed by Yuhabak's power. Again, this marks a pretty clear departure from the anime, where she and Meninas were in fact consumed by the Owl's Valen. Mayuri reveals he rebooted her body, and as such she's been half zombified and had the roots of her mind eroded. Despite that, Candice still retains her fiery personality. Mayuri reveals to Candice that Lil Toto and Giselle are still alive, while Bambietta is still zombified. Candice is genuinely pleased to hear they're still alive, and is shocked to learn they betrayed Yhwach. Mayuri tells Candice that if she cooperates with him on the battlefield, he may release the other Quincies upon whom he's completed his work. Candice battles Ginjo and Tsukishima on Mayuri's behalf, but struggles to overcome them and their strange powers, including Ginjo's ability to use something very familiar to Candice, Getsuga Tensho. Meanwhile, it's also revealed that Nananajukup has survived, having been rescued from the brink of death by Mayuri after he was stabbed in the back by Basby. Although technically bound to Mayuri, Nanana plans to use this opportunity to observe as many Shinigami as possible in preparation for his escape. He attempted to use the underbelly on Mayuri upon being captured, but was shocked by the electrical equipment that Mayuri has now placed inside him during experimentation. Meninas Macallon also appears to aid Candice in her battle with the Fullbringers, reminding Candice that she is meant to secure the enemy, not destroy them. Much later, the fighting in Rukongai goes haywire, with Grimjo arriving to battle both Ginjo and Tsukishima before Lupi joins in the skirmish to try and kill Grimjo, leading to both Candice and Meninas simply observing the unfolding battle from the sidelines. Later, Candice also witnesses the arrival of Hikone on the battlefield and his releasing of Ikomikidomoe. Candice and Meninas decide to join in the fight against Ikomikidomoe, with Meninas using the power to attack the monster and give Candice an opening to use the Thunderbolt. Although the two of them are vaguely successful in moving the gigantic hollow, the enormous monster unleashes a horde of controlled hollows upon the Quincies, overwhelming them. Candice and Meninas are rescued by the timely arrival of Lil Toto, Giselle, and Bambietta, who followed the Espada from Waco Mundo to the Serete. Lil Toto devours a vast swath of the oncoming wave of hollows, chastising Candice and Meninas for getting involved so carelessly. When Giselle proposes they now run away, since they're all reunited, Lil Toto speculates Mayuri has implanted his captives with explosives, and so speaks to the mad scientist via a communications device found in Candice's cap. Mayuri strikes a deal with Lil Toto. If they can get him as much information on Ikomikidomoe and Hikone as possible, he might consider letting them go, or at the very least promoting Candice and Meninas from experiments to mercenaries, while also offering to make Lil Toto taller as a bonus. Eventually, Lil Toto ends up speaking directly with Hikone, and even questions whether Gremmy's brain was used in Hikone's creation, to which Hikone confirms it was. As Lil Toto thinks on Gremmy, we are treated to a brief flashback between the two Sternritter, showing that Lil Toto and Gremmy had something of a friendship, or maybe as close to a friendship as was possible within the Vandenreich, as they banter freely with each other, while he imagines Lil Toto a mountain of donuts to try and satiate her unending hunger. It's a nice moment, and exactly the sort of thing we needed a bit more of in the manga between the Sternritter. Well, okay, a lot more of. Lil Toto is angered by the use of Gremmy's brain in such a callous way, as an ingredient, and attacks Hikone, and another battle breaks out. Later, when Hikone tries to flee using a Garganta, they fire a massive Gran Ray Cero at their pursuers, resulting in Lil Toto devouring a portion of it with the Glutton, while Neliel manages the rest with Cero Doble. Noting they have similar powers, Neliel tells Lil Toto that so long as they leave Waco Mundo be from now on, there's really no reason for their two sides to continue fighting. The Bambis and Nanana all converge on Kukakushiba's residence later on to hear out the plan of attack, though Nanana harbours a grudge towards the other Quincy for securing their freedom, while Mayuri believes there is more for Nanana to do. The Sternritter travel with everyone else to the Valley of Screams for the final battle. Once the battle against Tokinada begins, Lil Toto asks Grimjo if Neliel is Ichigo's partner, to which Grimjo responds that Orihime is Ichigo's partner, leading Lil Toto to remark that Ichigo seems like a womanizer. While the insane Tokinada tries to explain his mad scheme, Candice, along with the other bloodthirsty warriors, prepares to attack. Together, Lil Toto and Candice battle Hikone, with Lil Toto noting that Hikone's strength, while great, is inferior to Ichigo's. Maninas lands a massive punch on Hikone and manages to send them flying, but in return her hand is warped and broken by the impact. Meanwhile, the zombified Bambietta strikes the child with a volley of bombs, causing a massive explosion. While the fighting continues, the Quincies begin to be overwhelmed by Hikone, leading to Lil Toto consuming another of their oncoming Sero. After Kenpachi arrives, the Bambis back down momentarily. Later in the fight, Ikomikidomoi finds itself on the back foot and is assaulted from all sides by its enemies, including the Bambis, who unleash a united front against the monster. Maninas slams into the creature, sending him flying, and in response, Ikomikidomoi creates a variety of offshoots of itself, only for them all to be instantly swallowed up by Lil Toto's power. Candice, Giselle, and Bambietta continue to bombard the creature with attacks, and Nanana even joins in, eventually paralysing all of Ikomikidomoi's limbs, as well as its many clone creations, remarking that Askin would have called this a fatal situation, which again I liked. Apparently everyone likes Askin within the Vandenreich. As Tokinada's plan is foiled, the Sternritter continue to watch the battle between Kenpachi and Hikone play out before them, eventually observing as the fight transitions to a duel between Hisagi and Hikone instead, wherein Hisagi reveals not only the true power of his Zanpakuto Kazushini, but his bankai as well. Once we reach the end of the light novel, the final fates of the Sternritter after the 1,000-year Blood War arc are revealed. Nanana complains that he was the only Quincy who was forced to remain a part of the Kurotsuchi Corps unit, as he observes the squabbling between the Privaron Espada, though Mayuri insinuates that he's kept collars on Candice and Maninas for future use as well. Meanwhile, in a coffee shop in the human world, Bambietta's personality has seemingly been restored, yet physically she remains a zombie. When Candice wonders what's going on with this, Giselle notes that she probably gave Bambietta too much blood after the battle with Tokinada. Bambietta, excited by the restoration of her former self, can't remember anything after the duel with Komamura, but notes that if they say Yhwach is gone, then it's up to her to succeed him as the Queen of the Quincy. At the same time, Lil Toto wonders about the communications devices that Mayuri implanted within Candice and Maninas, and if there's any way to remove them. With Lil Toto wondering what move to make next, Giselle suggests returning to Waco Mundo, but Lil Toto notes that the Aranka are annoying to deal with, and there isn't much in the way of food there either. Bambietta, her spirit seemingly alive and well, though with a tendency to go off the rails a bit since her zombification, declares they should blow up a neighbouring country to assert her dominance as the new Queen of the Quincies, to which Lil Toto notes Bambietta's overexuberance might be a problem as they try to blend into the human world, even dressed now in normal personal clothing. When Giselle says that she can just beat Bambietta up some to drain the blood a bit, they speculate that Bambietta might return to her zombified state of her own accord over time anyway. And sure enough, despite her excitement at being restored to her former self at last, Bambietta's freedom slowly slips away, and she sinks back into her zombified persona, her eyes becoming vacant as she instead focuses on the cake in front of her, her individuality vanishing perhaps forever as she becomes Giselle's slave once more. Alright, but that's it for today's video. That is pretty much everything regarding the surviving Sternritter in the wake of the 1,000-year Blood War arc and what role they play in the light novel Can't For Your Own World. So, in the aftermath then, only the Bambis, I guess you can include Bambietta in that, and Nanana Najakoop managed to actually survive the war with the Shinigami, which isn't great. I kind of wish more of them had managed to live to tell the tale, to be totally honest, but there we go. Who knows if the Hell Arc ever happens, maybe Kubo will resurrect a couple of other Sternritter out of nowhere. I once had the idea that when Yhwach was killed, all those he stole the powers and lives from, that energy would return to them and potentially resurrect any who were killed prior to Yhwach's downfall, so maybe the likes of Basby, but That was pure speculation on my part and just a way for me to get the Sternritter back to life. Let me know what you think down in the comments below regarding the Sternritter's respective fates at the end of the 1000-Year Blood War arc and in everything that's happened since. I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comments below, so do please let me know. And how do you feel about the way the anime really seems to be changing, altering the ending of the Bambis as far as they go in Can't Fear Your Own World? It does seem like it's almost gone out of its way to decanonize what happens to the Bambis in the light novel, so I'd love to get your thoughts on that as well, so do please let me know. Alright everyone, once again, thank you so very much for watching. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from this video as well. Consider hitting subscribe down below if you enjoyed today's video and you want to see more just like it from the channel. It really does help support me, and I do greatly appreciate it. Check out my other channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, as well, and as always, a huge thank you and a massive shout out goes out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without who I simply wouldn't be able to keep doing this. So again, if you want to support me over there as well, it really would mean absolutely everything. It would make one hell of a Christmas present, and again, I would greatly appreciate it, so thank you all so very much. Alright guys, until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.